Alright, welcome back. So in this video, I wanted to go through some non-destructive workflows for creating a cavity pass and a peaks pass as well. So in the first video, I started off with creating this base. You can see that here is just base color, a little bit of nose stuff, and blending of some of the colors. What I've done is that I've copied these layers. So you can control click these layers, right click and copy layers. And you want to bring that to the top. Now at the really top, you want to add this to a folder. You can see this is what this looks like. So I've just added these 3 layers that I've copied into a folder. Now what you want to do is you want to add this generator, this filter, sorry. You want to add that to the folder level. So come up to the folder, go to the effects and add a filter. And the filter you're looking for is this one here. So HSL perception. In this filter, we can just play around with the settings. So we can mess around with the hue a little bit, the saturation, and importantly, we can reduce the lightness to create a darkness, sort of darkness over the whole thing. And then I've also changed this to a multiply. So the layer blend mode is changed to multiply. This is what it looks like normally. And this is what it looks like with the multiply on top. So once you have that done and you've done or changed everything up to your liking, what you need to do is add a mask. You want to add a white mask. So I have this toggled off, but with the white mask, sorry, you don't want to add a white mask, you want to add a black mask. So the black mask will take everything away. And then in the mask itself, you want to add a paint layer. And again, this is at a folder level, not an individual layers level. And in this white mask, or black mask, let's say you're painting white. So I'm going to toggle this on so you can see the results of this. And it's going to come in here and load it up. And I'll toggle the folder on and off. So you can see I've come in here and just painted some sort of darker areas, especially in the sort of crevices, the cavity parts of the body, but also extending some of the patterns that I've done up here to make it look a little bit more interesting. I'll zoom out a bit so you can see. You can see that around the legs and the toes. Oops, it's loading, so I'll just let that load. So, whilst that loads, the brush that I use for this pass is in here. So I'll make this panel a little bit bigger. You can find it towards the top. So there's the cement brushes. Let's find that. It's these ones here. So cement 1 works really well for this because it's a very sort of cloudy brush to begin with, and you can get some nice results. So I'll just toggle this on and off again. Alright, so it's loading. I'm not going to toggle it anymore. It seems like it's going to take a while. Well, let's jump into the paint layer. And I'll come into here, and let's say I want to add a little bit more around the forearm area, and maybe a little bit more under the armpits. And what this would do is that it would just give you a bit more contrast in the surface, in the areas that are sort of caving in a little bit. And I'm going to make sure I have symmetry turned on. So it's on. I'll just double check that. Yep. And with this particular brush, you need to lower the opacity, stroke opacity, but you don't need to lower it too much because it's already a very cloudy sort of brush. And I'm just going to lightly paint in this area. And what I want to paint is a white color. So I'm going to bring that all the way to the top. And if you need to get rid of anything, you can press X on the keyboard. So that will grab the invert of this slider. So white is to bring back. And you can see it's a subtle effect where we're sort of darkening some of these areas up like this. And let's say, I did some work here and I'm not too happy with that. All you need to do is press X and it will go to black and you can just easily erase that out. Now, the great thing about working this way is that because we're working with mask, it's all non-destructive, so we can take things away and bring things back if we don't like it. So we can easily sort of experiment with different looks and come back from it if if we're not too happy with the results. I'll just add a little bit more around here. I think around the elbow, especially, probably should have a little bit more darkening. You can sort of make these sort of features pop a lot more. Come into here, add a little bit more around here. And I'll press X to sort of shape that a little bit. Make sure I don't get any on the areas that I don't want that to be on. And yeah, we go through this pass and you get into these little sort of areas here. You want to use a smaller brush, of course, and you want to sort of brush into this sort of area. I find it's easier in a way to sort of brush what I need and then press X to remove and then sort of shape that out a little bit more. So if I want to feather that effect out a little bit, I can just press X and sort of remove that part. Okay, so I'll probably go through this whole area and do that sort of detailing like this. So again, you don't want it to be so obvious. So if it's coming out a bit too much, just bring down the stroke opacity a little bit. It's a subtle effect and it really adds a lot to the final look of your creature. So I'll come into here, do a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so once you've done a pass over the whole character, you want to do the sort of opposite of that. So we got a light one here. So I'll turn that on and then we can take a look at it. So I'll toggle the mask, turn that on so we can take a look. Now this is going through the same thing. Just copy the base, put that into a new folder at the top, and then add a HSL perceptive filter on top. And then this one here, you can make it a little bit brighter or increase the saturation or hue. So you can see I haven't really played with the brightness too much. If anything, I've probably made it lower in brightness and increase the saturation a little bit and change the hue. Now the important part with this one, and it's not going to work for every single, it's not going to work for everything. There's just a little bit of roughness here that I've got to fix up. Again, it's not going to work for everything, but in this case, I've changed the layer blend mode to screen. So this will work really well for bright things, so bright colors on top of the dark surfaces, or the surface underneath will pop out a little bit more. And it blends nicely with the creature. Now obviously this is too much, so you need to then add a black mask. And within that mask, you want to add a paint effect. And in the mask, you're doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to toggle the mask on so you can see the final result. And then I'll take this line off for the symmetry. And if I toggle this off and on, you can see the effect, and I've really just done this on the face, but you can see the changes there. So it just went from this, and I've just added some highlights around the eyebrow bone, these sort of wart areas, and around the face and ears. And it's just to make things pop a little bit more. You can see I've worked my way down here along this sort of wrinkly part of the skin and neck. Now I will do the same thing for pretty much everywhere as well. So I'm just going to change the camera rotation to free rotation, because that's the way I like it. And again, using the same cement brush, just coming to the peaks. Instead of the crevices, you're looking at the peaks. And you're sort of hitting the peaks of any sort of details. And again, it's a very subtle effect. You don't want to make it obvious. But what that will do is that it will make that detail pop a lot more than just having a simple color across the whole thing. But what's great about the multiply and screen blend modes is that you still see the details underneath, so it's not overpowering. So it blends nicely with the stuff that we've already done. And I'll just make my way through and go over these areas. Now again, just like the other one, if you've gone a bit too far and you think that it's a bit too overpowering or too obvious in some areas, all you need to do is press X, and that will shoot that straight to the opposite end. So it will be black, and then we can paint in the areas we don't want to remove that effect. Now you can see I've painted a little bit here. So now if I toggle this off, you can see that pop. So it's almost like turning a light on. And I'll make my way through the whole model. Even on areas like here, I would come into this area where it's peaking with a larger brush. And I might experiment with this a little bit, but I probably need to reduce the opacity quite a bit. But I'll come in here and just start painting. So I'm using black. So I need to come in here with a white brush. And you can see it just sort of pops this area out a little bit. And it's a very subtle effect. So if I toggle this on and off, you can see that. And I'll make my way through the whole model and add a little bit there. Okay, so even over here, I'll probably come into this area, just add a little bit. I don't want to add too much, and I don't want it to be so obvious, but I think it's getting a little bit too obvious, so I might bring down the opacity a little bit. And what's great about working with the opacity is that we can press X and it has that opacity, so we can go over the areas that we thought was a bit too strong to sort of blend that back in a little bit. And you can see it's still there, it's just not as in your face, it's not as obvious, right? So just like the cavity darkness areas, this is more of a subtle effect. And I find a lot of texturing is that sort of subtleness of the smaller details. And that's what's going to make it pop a lot more than just going in and just adding a whole lot of very noisy, very obvious sort of details. Right, I might use a bigger brush. I might brush over this whole area a little bit just to see how that looks. Again, I'm going to toggle this on and off. It's a bit splotchy, so I might fix this up a little bit. Then I'll come into here, do the belly, of course. Making sure I look at my base color. So coming up to here, looking at base color, this is what we always want to look at. More so than this. Okay, and let's take a look. Toggle this on and off. So you can see it just pops a little bit more. I'll do the same thing for here. Now some of this detailing is asymmetrical around here, only a little bit. Um, so just keep in mind if you have any sort of asymmetrical detailing as you're doing this. So just come into here. You can see that effect nicely. Okay, so let's change the camera, the base color. Just add a little bit there. You can see that coming through. Just add a little bit more over here. And a little bit down there. And then I'll add a little bit over here. Now this part is a little bit asymmetrical, so I'm going to turn symmetry off for this. And just manually sort of hit those peaks. Check that in the color, base color. Okay, so let's take a look at this effect. And you can see it's a subtle effect, but it makes it pop. And let's give this a render. Now, I just want to make everyone understand that this render preview inside Substance is not what you should be basing the final look on. When we take this into Maya for proper rendering, that's what is gonna it's gonna look very different from that, I should say. Oops, I'm getting a little bit lost. What we can do in here is sort of lock to camera position. Bugs out sometimes in this free rotation. What we can do in this render view is just get an idea of how it's going to look and what we want it to sort of look like. So I've just come into here and changed a lot of the color correction and tone mapping and vignetting, just to sort of get a sense of how it might be looking. And I know it's going to look fairly different inside Maya, not too much, but it's going to look more realistic. But I'm just sort of looking at whether it's heading in the right direction in general. So some of the highlights that I've done, see if it's sort of working, if it's a bit too obvious, or if it needs a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here, and what I was working on before, is coming up to these smaller detailings on their face and hitting these areas with the highlights, just making these sort of little details that I've made pop a little bit more. And this part is somewhat asymmetrical, so I'm going to take symmetry off. Cool. And I'll probably come in back into this darkness pass, and just in between some of these smaller details, just to paint a little bit of darkness in the pigment. So it just makes this sort of detail that I sculpted in look more obvious, so it pops a little bit more. 'Cause it wasn't. It was sort of getting hidden with the colors on top. It was blending it in a bit too much. So you can come into here with the peaks and crevices pass to make these like little details pop a bit more. Okay, probably went too far with that. Which is fine because all I need to do is just come into here, press X, probably reduce the opacity quite a bit, and then just brush over this general area to make that blend a bit better. Look at it from a distance as well. It's always good. Okay, so that wraps up this video. So non-destructive workflow, but an easy and great way to get peaks and so darkness and highlights in. You can try to use some of these curvatures and like the dirt passes as well, but I do find that you can get to a certain point with these, which I've done, but if you really want to have full control over your texturing, you got to do it manually. And in my opinion, that's the fun part. So I'll see you guys in the next one.